The Apache woman chased the cowboy, but ended up marrying him backslash. In the quiet of the early morning, the land seemed almost peaceful, yet the air carried a tension that was always present in these parts. This was a land of both beauty and danger, where the wind whispered through the canyons, and every shadow could hide a story. Nayeli, a young Apache woman, moved quietly along the edge of a river. Her dark hair fell like a waterfall down her back, and her eyes were sharp, always watching, always alert. She had grown up in these lands, learning from her elders how to track animals, read the signs of nature, and move silently across the earth. Today, she carried a small bow and a few arrows just in case. She wasn't hunting, at least not in the usual way. Nayeli had heard something unusual, the sound of a horse's hooves on a trail where no settler should be. Her heart beat a little faster. Visitors were not common, and outsiders were often dangerous. Many people from the towns nearby came into Apache lands only for trouble, stealing, spying, or causing fights. Nayeli had been taught to protect her people, to act quickly and decisively. Still, she could not help her curiosity. Who could be riding alone in such a wild place, so early in the morning? As she followed the sound carefully, keeping low in the tall grasses and behind the scattered rocks, she caught sight of the rider. He was a man, tall and lean, wearing the kind of worn clothes that most cowboys wore. A wide-brimmed hat shaded his face, but his eyes were visible, sharp, calm, and observant. His horse was strong and healthy, a light brown color with a white patch on its forehead. The way he rode showed skill, yet he was cautious, as if he did not want to disturb the land more than necessary. Nayeli's first instinct was to chase him away. Her people had lived here for generations, and strangers were often not friendly. She nocked an arrow and drew her bow, her hands steady despite the rush of adrenaline in her chest. But as she watched him more closely, she noticed something strange. The man was not looking around like a thief or a spy. He was careful with the riverbank, avoiding the nests of birds and stepping lightly over the roots. There was a respect in his movements, a way of treating the land as though it mattered more than himself. Before Nayeli could decide what to do, the man leaned down suddenly, reaching toward the edge of the river. She couldn't see what he was doing at first, but then she noticed a small boy struggling in the shallow water. The current had pulled him off balance, and he was splashing and panicking. Without thinking, the cowboy acted quickly. He grabbed the boy's arm and pulled him to safety, lifting him onto the shore with care. Nayeli's hand froze on her bowstring. This man he was helping, not harming. She watched silently as he set the boy down, brushing the wet hair from his face and checking to make sure he was okay. The boy smiled shyly, whispering thanks, and the cowboy nodded before mounting his horse again. Still, Nayeli could not let him pass so easily. Her duty to protect her people was stronger than her curiosity. She stepped out from her hiding place, calling to him in a firm voice. "Stop! You do not belong here." The cowboy turned slowly, his expression calm but alert. "I mean no harm," he said, his voice low but steady. "I was only helping the boy. I am not your enemy." Nayeli did not lower her bow. "Your presence is dangerous," she said. "You could bring trouble to this land. Why are you here?" He thought for a moment, then spoke honestly. "I travel these lands for work. I herd cattle sometimes, I ride from place to place. But I respect this land and your people. I do not wish to cause any harm." For a moment, Nayeli studied him carefully. His words seemed true, but she had learned not to trust appearances alone. Many had lied before, and many had caused pain despite good words. Still, she felt a strange pull toward him, a curiosity that she could not ignore. There was something in the way he held himself, steady and calm, that did not match the usual arrogance or greed she had seen in outsiders. She decided to test him. "If you truly mean no harm, then prove it," she said. "Follow the river to the canyon's edge. Do not stray from the path. Any trick and you will regret it." The cowboy nodded once. "I will do as you ask." Naeli lowered her bow slightly but stayed close, her eyes never leaving him. As they walked together, the morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows on the rocky ground. They moved silently for a while, the sound of the river and the soft clop of the horses' hooves filling the air. After some time, they reached the canyon edge. The view was breathtaking. Red and orange rocks stretched for miles, and the river sparkled below. The cowboy looked out at the landscape, his eyes reflecting a mix of admiration and respect. Naeli watched him carefully, still unsure but noticing that he did not take more than he needed, did not touch anything that did not belong to him. "I see you know this land well," he said quietly. "It is beautiful, but it can be dangerous. Thank you for guiding me safely." Naeli said nothing, her eyes narrowed. She had learned that words were easy, but actions were harder to fake. Still, the cowboy's tone was gentle, not demanding or arrogant. For the first time, Naeli felt a small shift in her heart. Perhaps not trust yet, but curiosity and maybe even respect. As the day progressed, they moved along the river, occasionally stopping to rest. Naeli pointed out safe paths, hidden rocks, and places where water was deep or shallow. The cowboy listened carefully, nodding and sometimes asking questions about the land, the river, or the plants along the way. His genuine interest impressed her. He did not mock, he did not dismiss, he learned. By late afternoon, they had traveled several miles together. Naeli knew she would have to return to her people soon. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and purple. She finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "You must leave soon. The night can be dangerous for strangers. Wolves, storms, many things you do not yet know." The cowboy nodded. "I understand. I will not stay longer than necessary. Thank you for showing me the way." Naeli turned, preparing to return to her tribe. As she walked back along the path she knew so well, she felt a strange mixture of emotions. She had chased him, tested him, and still she could not deny that he was different. He was respectful, brave, and careful, a man who might not belong fully in her world, but one who seemed to understand it better than many she had met. That night, as Naeli sat near the fire with her family, she found her mind wandering back to the cowboy. She told herself to be cautious, to remember her duty, but a small spark of curiosity remained. Who was this man? Why did he act differently than the others? And could someone like him truly be trusted? The answers would not come quickly. But for the first time, Naeli realized that sometimes, even in a world full of rules and danger, meeting the right person could change everything. And so, the first encounter ended, quietly, with tension, respect, and curiosity. Naeli had chased him, yes, but she had also observed something rare. A man who did not simply pass through her land, but one who seemed to move with care and understanding, and perhaps, in time, with honor. Little did she know, this encounter at the river would mark the beginning of a journey neither she nor the cowboy could have imagined. A journey that would test their courage, their trust, and eventually, their hearts. The days after their first meeting were quiet for Naeli, but her thoughts often wandered to the cowboy she had chased at the river. James, she had learned his name from the young boy he saved, kept appearing in her mind. She told herself it was foolish to think much of a stranger. Her life had always been about her people, her family, and the land they depended on. Outsiders often brought trouble, and her elders had warned her countless times to never trust them. But James was different. There was something in the way he moved, the way he observed the world around him, that stayed with her. He did not act like the others who had come into Apache lands. He seemed careful, respectful, almost aware. Naeli did not understand why, but she could not stop thinking about him. One morning, as the sun rose slowly over the mountains, Naeli decided to return to the river. Not to see James, she told herself firmly, but to check the area. She wanted to make sure everything was safe for her people. The river was a source of life, fish, water, and fresh plants grew along its banks, but it could also be dangerous if outsiders wandered too close. Naomi walked with quiet confidence, her steps practiced from years of moving through the land. To her surprise, she saw James again. He was sitting by the river, cleaning his horse and carefully examining the water. He looked up when he heard her approach and smiled politely, though his eyes were cautious. "You came back," Naomi said, keeping her voice steady. "I wanted to see if everything was all right," James replied. "I know the river is important to your people. I don't want to cause any trouble." Naomi studied him for a moment. There was truth in his words. He could have ridden away, ignored the land, or simply passed through. Instead, he had returned, showing concern for the place and the people who lived there. Her suspicions slowly began to soften, replaced by cautious curiosity. "You must follow my rules," Naomi said. "Stay on the path I show you. Do not touch anything that does not belong to you. If you stray, there will be consequences." James nodded without hesitation. "I understand. I will do as you say." Over the next few days, Naomi found herself observing James more closely. She noticed how carefully he approached every task. When he fished in the river, he did so gently, taking only what he needed and leaving the rest for the animals and people who relied on it. When he set up a small camp, he made sure to leave no traces behind, careful not to disturb the ground or plants. Naomi had rarely seen a stranger show such care. She began to follow him at a distance sometimes, watching quietly as he navigated the land. At first, she told herself it was only to protect her people, but slowly she realized she was also learning from him. James had a way of noticing things, footprints, changes in the wind, signs of animals that impressed her. He was not just lucky, he was observant, thoughtful, and patient. One afternoon, a small challenge presented itself. James had wandered slightly off the path, and Naomi saw him pause near a narrow canyon. A rock had shifted beneath his horse's hoof, causing the animal to stumble slightly. Naomi acted quickly. She ran forward, calling his name. James turned his head just in time to see her reach him. "Careful," she said, grabbing the reins to steady the horse. "Thank you," he said sincerely, his eyes showing genuine relief. "I didn't notice that rock." "You must always watch the land," Naomi said firmly. "Even small mistakes can be dangerous." James nodded, listening carefully. He did not make excuses or act frustrated. Instead, he seemed to accept her guidance and learn from it. Naomi felt a small flicker of admiration. Perhaps he was not just careful out of caution. Perhaps he truly respected the land in the way her people did. As the days passed, their relationship slowly changed. Naomi still kept her distance, wary of trusting a stranger too quickly, but she began speaking to James more often. They shared small conversations about the river, the mountains, and the animals. Naomi learned that James had grown up in a small town far from the Apache lands. He had been taught to ride horses and herd cattle from a young age, but he had always been drawn to the wild places, where he could explore and observe without disturbing them. James, in turn, asked questions about Naomi's life and her people. He listened carefully as she spoke of the Apache traditions, the importance of the river, and the ways of the land. He never interrupted, never mocked, and never dismissed what she said. His respect for her knowledge and her people impressed Naomi more than she cared to admit. One evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Naomi and James sat on a small rock near the river. The water sparkled in the fading light, and the gentle sound of the current filled the quiet. For a moment neither spoke, simply observing the beauty of the land. "You see this place every day," James said softly, breaking the silence. "But I feel like I'm seeing it for the first time. There's a peace here that I have never found anywhere else." Naomi looked at him carefully. "This land is life for my people," she said. "It gives us food, water, and safety. We cannot take it lightly." "I understand," James replied, "and I will not take it lightly. I promise." The sincerity in his voice was clear. Naomi felt a small warmth in her chest, a feeling she had not expected. She told herself to remain cautious, to keep her distance, but a part of her could not deny that James was different from any stranger she had ever met. The next few days brought new challenges. A sudden storm swept through the area, bringing heavy rain and strong winds. The river swelled, and branches broke from trees, falling across the paths. James and Naomi had to work together to navigate the dangerous terrain. Naomi guided James, showing him which paths were safe and which were too risky. James listened carefully, following her instructions without complaint. During the storm, Naomi saw another side of James. He was brave, calm under pressure, and willing to face danger to help others. At one point, he rescued a small deer trapped in the rising waters, carrying it to safety without hesitation. Naomi was surprised by his courage and compassion. She had expected him to be cautious, but he went beyond caution. He acted with thoughtfulness and care for all living things. By the time the storm passed, Naomi's respect for James had grown even more. She began to trust him, not fully, but enough to allow him closer. They shared small moments of laughter as they dried their clothes and tended to their horses. The walls of suspicion that had kept Naomi distant were slowly starting to crumble, replaced by a growing sense of connection. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, James looked at Naomi and said, "I have traveled many lands, but I have never met someone like you. You know this place in a way I can only hope to understand. I respect you, Naomi." Naomi felt a flutter in her chest. She told herself not to be swayed by words alone, but she could not deny that his presence brought a sense of calm and trust she had not felt before. She nodded quietly, acknowledging his words without giving too much away. From that moment on, their bond continued to grow. Naomi still remained cautious, but she began to see James as more than just a stranger. He was someone who could understand the land, respect her people, and face challenges with courage and care. And James, in turn, continued to admire Naomi's strength, intelligence, and dedication to her tribe. Though their journey together had only just begun, it was clear that their first encounter at the river had set the stage for something extraordinary. Both of them were learning, growing, and beginning to trust one another, step by careful step. And so, the days continued, with Naomi and James navigating the challenges of the wild, learning from each other, and slowly forming a connection that neither could have predicted. The river, the mountains, and the open plains became the backdrop for a story that was just beginning. A story of courage, respect, and the unlikely bond between an Apache woman and a cowboy from another world. Little did they know, the challenges ahead would test not only their courage, but also the trust and friendship that was slowly turning into something much deeper. The quiet of the Apache lands did not last forever. As days turned into weeks, a new challenge arrived, testing both Naomi and James in ways they had never faced before. The wide plains and rugged canyons had always been beautiful, but they were also dangerous. The world beyond the mountains was changing. Settlers were moving closer, and bandits sometimes roamed the area, taking what they wanted without thought for the people who had lived there for generations. One afternoon, Naomi noticed something unusual while scouting along the river. She had gone ahead to check the area for any threats, keeping her eyes on the hills and the distant trails. In the distance, she saw a group of men moving quickly, their horses kicking up dust as they rode. They were strangers, and the way they moved made her uneasy. Naomi immediately understood. They were not travelers or settlers, they were here for trouble. She ran back to James, who was setting up a small camp nearby. "There are men coming," she said, urgency in her voice. "They are not friendly. We must be careful." James looked up, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. "How many?" he asked. "4 or 5, Naomi replied. "They ride fast and they do not respect this land. They may be bandits." James stood, quickly assessing the situation. "We cannot face them head on," he said. "But we can prepare. We know this land. We can use it to our advantage." Together, they moved quickly, finding higher ground near a ridge overlooking the path the men would take. Naomi pointed out rocks and fallen logs they could use for cover, while James helped position their horses safely out of sight. They worked silently but efficiently, each aware that the approaching danger could change everything. As the bandits drew closer, Naomi felt a surge of protective instinct. She had grown up learning to defend her people, and now she had to protect James as well. She watched the men carefully, noting their movements and estimating their intentions. They were rough-looking, with dusty clothes and worn hats, carrying weapons that looked dangerous. Naomi's hand instinctively went to the bow she carried, while James prepared a rifle he had brought along. When the bandits reached the base of the ridge, James and Naomi stayed hidden, waiting for the right moment. Naomi's heart pounded in her chest, but she remained calm on the outside. She had faced danger before, but this time it was different. James was with her, a stranger who had become an ally, and she could not let anything happen to him. The bandits began to split up, looking for signs of movement. One of them approached the riverbank, suspicious of tracks that had been left behind. Naomi signaled to James, and they both held their positions, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Suddenly, one of the bandits slipped on a wet rock near the river, losing balance. James saw this and quickly acted. He aimed carefully, not to harm, but to scare the man away. A single shot rang out, hitting a nearby rock and sending a loud echo across the canyon. The bandit stumbled back, shouting warnings to the others. Naomi took a deep breath, then loosed an arrow into the ground near another bandit. The sharp twang of the string and the sudden sound startled him, and he jumped back, eyes wide. The rest of the men looked around, realizing that someone was watching them. They did not see who, only that they were being observed and that the land itself seemed to fight back. Using the confusion, James and Naomi signaled to each other. They worked together seamlessly, their movements silent but coordinated. Naomi used her knowledge of the terrain to guide the bandits away from the river, while James followed, careful to avoid unnecessary confrontation. Slowly, carefully, they forced the intruders to retreat, using clever distractions, their voices hidden, and the echoing shots of the rifle to make the bandits believe they were facing a much larger force. By the time the sun began to set, the bandits were gone. They had realized that the land was not theirs to command and had retreated, leaving the river and the surrounding canyon untouched. Naomi and James allowed themselves a brief moment to relax, though both knew the danger was not entirely gone. "You handled that well," Naomi said finally, her voice calm but edged with admiration. "You did not panic, you thought quickly." James looked at her and smiled faintly. "I had a good teacher," he said. "You knew what to do, I just followed your lead." Naomi felt warmth in her chest, a strange feeling she did not fully understand. She had been cautious with him, wary of trusting an outsider, but in this moment she realized that she did trust him. He had proven himself in the wild, not just through words but through actions. The following days brought other challenges. As the seasons began to change, the river swelled with melting snow from the mountains, making travel more difficult. The land that had seemed calm during the summer became unpredictable and wild. Naomi and James had to navigate muddy paths, fallen trees, and sudden rainstorms. Each obstacle tested their patience, their skills, and their growing connection. During one particularly difficult day, they encountered a small herd of deer trapped on a narrow strip of land by the river's rising waters. Naomi moved quickly, using her knowledge of animal behavior to guide them to safety. James assisted, using ropes and careful planning to ensure none of the animals were harmed. Together, they saved the herd, laughing quietly at their shared success as they worked. Through these challenges, Naomi noticed another change in herself. She had always been proud of her independence and her ability to handle any situation. Yet with James, She felt a growing sense of partnership, a realization that working together could achieve more than acting alone. She did not admit it aloud, but a part of her began to care for him in ways that were deeper than friendship. James, too, felt the shift. He had spent his life traveling alone, relying on his skills and instincts to survive. But with Nayeli, he discovered something he had not expected, a connection that went beyond survival. He admired her courage, her intelligence, and her unwavering respect for the land. He felt drawn to her strength, and he knew that he wanted to be by her side, not just as a companion on this journey, but in a deeper, more lasting way. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of purple and the first stars began to appear, they sat near the river, exhausted from the day's challenges. The air was cool, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. Nayeli looked at James and said, "I did not expect to meet someone like you. I thought all outsiders were the same, reckless, careless, or selfish. But you are different." James looked at her, his expression serious but gentle. "I did not expect to meet someone like you either," he said. "You are brave, strong, and wise. I have learned more from you than I have from anyone else." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, understanding passing silently between them. It was a moment of honesty, of recognition, and of respect. Neither of them spoke of love yet, but both knew that something important was growing between them. The following weeks continued to test their courage and skills. Small conflicts arose with neighboring settlers who did not understand the Apache ways, and natural challenges like sudden storms and wild animals kept them on alert. But through every difficulty, James and Nayeli relied on each other. They learned to anticipate each other's actions, communicate without words, and trust one another in ways that felt both natural and rare. One day, while traveling through a narrow canyon, they found evidence of other travelers, tracks that did not belong to them, discarded items, and signs of campfires. Nayeli's instincts immediately went on high alert. "We are not alone," she whispered, scanning the cliffs above. James nodded, moving close to her. "We will face this together," he said. "Whatever comes, we can handle it." As the sun set, they found a safe place to camp for the night, hidden from view. They tended to their horses and gathered wood for a fire. Sitting side by side, they shared quiet conversation, talking about their pasts, their families, and their hopes for the future. Each word, each glance, strengthened the bond that had begun at the river so long ago. By the time they fell asleep under the stars, both Nayeli and James felt a sense of connection that went beyond friendship. They were partners, allies, and something more, something neither had fully named but both recognized. The challenges they faced had tested their courage, their skills, and their trust, but they had emerged stronger, more confident, and closer than ever. And so, life in the Apache lands continued, with danger always nearby but with a new strength between them. Nayeli and James had faced bandits, storms, and the wild challenges of the land, and they had survived together. Each obstacle had drawn them closer, teaching them that trust, respect, and courage were more powerful than fear or suspicion. Little did they know, the days ahead would bring even greater tests, challenges that would push the limits of their bravery and force them to confront not only the dangers of the land, but also the depth of their own hearts. The early morning mist hung low over the Apache lands, wrapping the canyons and plains in a soft, silver haze. Nayeli woke before the sun, as she always did, her senses alert to the sounds and movements of the world around her. She moved silently, checking the river and the surrounding trails, ensuring the land was safe for her people and for James. The cowboy had learned much from her guidance, but she still watched closely, trusting him only because he had earned her respect. James stirred nearby, stretching as he prepared for the day's journey. He had grown more confident navigating the land, yet he still listened to Nayeli, appreciating her knowledge and instincts. Together, they had traveled farther than either had expected, facing storms, wild animals, and the remnants of bandits who occasionally roamed the outskirts of the land. Through it all, they had relied on each other, and a bond of trust was slowly forming, though neither had spoken the words that might name it. On this particular morning, they had decided to explore a narrow canyon known for its steep cliffs and rushing streams. Nayeli believed the canyon might provide a safe path to higher ground if needed, and offered a vantage point to observe any travelers approaching the area. As they descended carefully along the rocky trail, the sun began to rise, illuminating the jagged edges and casting shadows that shifted with the flowing water below. The canyon was quiet, save for the distant rush of a waterfall and the occasional call of a bird. Nayeli led the way, her eyes scanning the rocks and the path ahead. James followed closely, holding his rifle loosely but ready if danger appeared. He admired the way Nayeli moved, confident and precise, each step measured to avoid loose stones or slippery surfaces. He had learned to trust her guidance completely, understanding that her knowledge of the land was unmatched. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the canyon. Nayeli froze, her heart pounding. She turned her head just in time to see a large boulder shift from above, tumbling toward them with terrifying speed. Instinctively, she shouted a warning. "Move!" James reacted immediately, grabbing Nayeli's arm and pulling her to the side. The boulder crashed into the canyon wall with a deafening roar, sending dust and smaller rocks scattering in all directions. Both stumbled, but Nayeli managed to steady herself against a jagged rock. She looked at James, whose eyes were wide with adrenaline. "That was close," he said, catching his breath. "I didn't see it coming." Nayeli nodded, her pulse still racing. "The canyon can be unpredictable," she said. "We must stay alert at all times. One mistake and it could be fatal." They continued cautiously, moving slower and more deliberately. The incident reminded them both of the dangers of the land and the importance of working together. James was careful not to get ahead, and Nayeli kept her eyes on the cliffs above, noting every loose rock and shadow that might signal another fall. As they reached a narrow ledge overlooking a rushing stream, Nayeli spotted movement in the water below. A young fawn had slipped and was struggling against the current, its small legs barely keeping it afloat. Without hesitation, Nayeli climbed down carefully, signaling to James to follow. Together, they reached the fawn. James steadied her from behind, while Nayeli extended her hands to guide the animal to safety. The fawn trembled, exhausted from fighting the water, but with their combined efforts, it eventually scrambled to solid ground and ran into the nearby forest. Both breathed a sigh of relief, their hearts still racing from the challenge. "That was dangerous," James said, looking at Nayeli with admiration. "You were incredible." Nayeli shook her head slightly. "We did it together," she said. "Alone, either of us could have been hurt. But together we managed." As they continued, the canyon narrowed, and the path became steeper. A sudden misstep by James caused him to slip slightly, and Nayeli caught his arm just in time. Their eyes met, and in that moment something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of reliance, trust, and an unspoken connection that went beyond words. Hours later, they reached the heart of the canyon, where the stream widened into a small pool. The sunlight filtered through the cliffs, casting shimmering patterns on the water. They rested, sitting on flat rocks, letting their horses graze nearby. James looked at Nayeli, his expression thoughtful. "I've traveled many lands," he said, "but I've never faced anything like this canyon. The beauty is breathtaking, but the danger is constant. I'm grateful you're here to guide me." Nayeli glanced at him, a small smile touching her lips. "And I am grateful you are here," she replied quietly. "You have proven yourself capable, brave, and trustworthy. I did not expect that from someone outside my people." Their words hung in the air, filled with meaning that neither fully expressed. There was a growing closeness, a sense that they were more than companions on a journey. They were partners in facing the wild, each relying on the other in ways that mattered deeply. But the canyon had one more test in store. As they prepared to leave the pool and continue their path, the sky darkened suddenly. Clouds rolled in, heavy and gray, and the wind began to howl through the narrow passage. Nayeli's instincts screamed caution. "A storm is coming," she warned. "We must find shelter quickly." They moved swiftly, but the terrain was treacherous. The rocks were slippery from previous rains, and loose stones threatened to send them tumbling. Suddenly, a flash flood began to surge down the canyon. Water, mud, and debris rushed violently through the narrow path, cutting off their escape route. Nayeli and James had no time to react, their hearts pounding as the canyon became a dangerous torrent. Nayeli grabbed James's hand, pulling him toward a small overhang in the rock. They pressed themselves against the stone wall as the flood surged around them, the sound deafening. Both were soaked, mud and water dripping from their clothes and hair, but they held tight to each other. "This is too strong," James shouted over the roar. "We cannot hold on much longer." Nayeli's eyes were sharp, searching the canyon walls for a safer place. "We must climb," she said. "Follow me." With incredible effort, they scrambled up the wet rocks, slipping and sliding but never letting go of each other. Every movement required trust and coordination. James supported Nayeli when her foot slipped, and she steadied him when a jagged rock threatened to cut him. They moved as one, relying on strength, skill, and their growing bond. After what felt like hours, though it was only minutes, they reached a narrow ledge high above the torrent. They collapsed onto the rock, gasping for breath, mud and water dripping from them. The flood continued below, but they were safe for the moment. They looked at each other, exhausted, yet filled with a profound sense of relief and accomplishment. "You saved me," James said finally, his voice quiet but sincere. "I would have been lost without you." Nayeli shook her head, smiling weakly. "We saved each other," she said. "Alone, neither of us would have made it." They sat together on the ledge, listening to the roar of the flood below, feeling the strength of their connection deepen. In that moment, both realized that their bond was no longer just about trust or respect. It was about reliance, courage, and a shared understanding that had grown through the most dangerous of circumstances. As the flood subsided and the sun began to peek through the clouds, painting the canyon in gold and silver, Nayeli and James descended carefully, making their way back to safer ground. The experience had changed them both. They had faced the raw power of nature, the unpredictability of the land, and their own fears, and they had survived together. By the time they returned to the riverbank where their journey had begun, the sun was setting in brilliant shades of orange and pink. They tended to their horses, cleaned their gear, and sat together in quiet reflection. Neither spoke much, but both felt the depth of what had occurred. The canyon had tested them, pushed them to their limits, and revealed a bond neither could ignore. That night, as they slept under the stars, Nayeli dreamed of the river, the canyon, and the wild land she loved. In her dream, she saw herself and James standing together, facing storms and rivers, cliffs and challenges. She awoke with a sense of certainty she had never felt before. James was no ordinary traveler. He was a partner, a companion, and perhaps, in time, something far more important. And James, too, lay awake under the stars, thinking of Nayeli. He had faced danger before, but never had he felt such a connection with another human being. Her courage, her wisdom, and her strength had inspired him, and he realized that he wanted to face the challenges of life not alone, but with her by his side. The canyon had changed everything. It had tested their courage, their trust, and their bond. And in surviving it together, they discovered something more profound than either had expected. A connection forged in the wild, strengthened by danger, and destined to grow into something extraordinary. Little did they know, the days ahead would continue to test them, not just through the land and its dangers, but through the choices their hearts would soon demand. The days after the canyon flood were calm but filled with quiet reflection. Nayeli and James had survived one of the most dangerous experiences of their lives, and it had brought them closer than either had expected. They had learned to rely on each other completely, facing the wild together and finding strength in their partnership. Yet, while the dangers of the land had strengthened their bond, another challenge loomed, one of acceptance. Nayeli knew her tribe would not easily welcome a stranger, no matter how brave or respectful he was. As they made their way back toward the main village, Nayeli's mind was full of concern. She had spent her life following the guidance of her elders, and she respected their wisdom deeply. The tribe had always protected its people and the land, and any outsider was met with suspicion. James had proven himself in the wild, but that alone might not be enough to earn the trust of her family and friends. When they arrived at the village, the elders were already aware of their approach. Nayeli had sent word ahead, explaining that she had traveled with a stranger who had shown respect and courage in the lands they called home. Still, the elders gathered, their expressions serious, waiting to judge for themselves. Nayeli led James to the center of the village, standing tall despite the tension in the air. "This is James," she said firmly. "He has traveled with me, faced the dangers of the canyon, and shown respect for our land and our people. He is not a threat." The elders exchanged glances, murmuring among themselves. One of the older women stepped forward, her eyes sharp and discerning. "A stranger walks with us and you say he is trustworthy?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. James stepped forward slowly, bowing his head in respect. "I do not wish to harm anyone," he said. "I only wish to learn, to understand, and to live in harmony with your people in this land. Nayeli guided me and I followed her. She taught me how to respect these lands and your ways. I am grateful for her guidance and I wish to honor it." There was silence for a moment. The elders listened, weighing his words against their own experience and knowledge. Nayeli watched closely, feeling a mixture of pride and apprehension. She knew that trust had to be earned, and she hoped that the bond she and James had formed in the canyon would be enough to persuade them. Finally, one of the elders, a man with lines of wisdom etched into his face, spoke. "You have faced the wild and survived," he said, his voice low and measured. "You have shown courage and respect, but you are still an outsider. To walk among us, you must prove that you honor our ways not just in words but in action." James nodded solemnly. "I understand. I will prove myself, not just for you, but for Nayeli and for this land. I wish to be worthy of your trust." The elders conferred briefly before making their decision. They decided that James would be allowed to stay with the tribe under the guidance of Nayeli and her family. He would participate in their daily tasks, learn their traditions, and demonstrate his commitment to their people. Nayeli felt a wave of relief. The journey ahead would be difficult, but James had shown he was willing to face it. Over the following weeks, James worked alongside the tribe. He learned to help with hunting and gathering, to care for the animals, and to respect the sacred areas of the land. Nayeli guided him patiently, answering his questions and correcting his mistakes without anger. The tribe observed him carefully, noting his willingness to learn and his genuine respect for their traditions. Slowly, they began to accept him. Through their daily interactions, the bond between Nayeli and James deepened even further. They shared small moments of laughter, quiet conversations under the stars, and the satisfaction of working together for the good of the tribe. Their connection was no longer just about trust or survival. It had grown into something more profound. Both began to feel the pull of something they had not dared to name until now: love. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of red and orange, James and Nayeli sat by the river, watching the water flow gently past. The air was filled with the sounds of the village settling in for the night and the distant call of a hawk. James turned to Nayeli, his expression serious yet soft. "Nayeli," he said quietly, "I have come to respect and admire you in ways I cannot fully describe. You have taught me so much about this land, about courage, and about life itself. I want to be by your side, not just as a friend or companion, but as someone who shares your heart and your life." Naomi looked at him, her eyes wide with emotion. She felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of joy, trust, and hope. She had been cautious for so long, but she realized now that her feelings for James had grown beyond friendship. "I feel the same," she said softly. "I was wary at first, but you have shown me your heart through your actions. I trust you and I care for you deeply." Their hands met, and in that simple touch, the depth of their bond was revealed. It was a moment of honesty, of connection, and of understanding that would shape the rest of their lives. They did not need words beyond the truth they felt in their hearts. The elders, observing from a respectful distance, nodded in quiet approval. They had seen the challenges James had faced, the respect he had shown, and the way he had grown under Naomi's guidance. They recognized that his presence could be a bridge between their people and the world beyond, and that the bond between Naomi and James was genuine and strong. In time, the tribe agreed to a ceremony that would honor both their traditions and the bond that had formed between them. The day was bright and clear, with the mountains standing tall in the distance and the river sparkling in the sunlight. The villagers gathered, dressed in traditional clothing, preparing to witness a union that symbolized courage, respect, and love. Naomi wore a simple but beautiful dress, adorned with patterns that represented her tribe and their connection to the land. James stood beside her, dressed in clothes that were practical yet respectful of the occasion, holding a small token of respect he had made with his own hands. The elders led the ceremony, blending the customs of the Apache with the recognition of the life James had built outside the tribe. When the moment came, Naomi and James exchanged words of commitment, not just to each other but to the land, the tribe, and the shared life they intended to build. Their voices were steady, their eyes locked, and the villagers watched in quiet reverence. It was a union not just of two people, but of two worlds brought together through courage, respect, and mutual understanding. After the ceremony, the tribe celebrated with music, food, and laughter. James participated fully, learning the dances and songs, and Naomi led him with pride and joy. Their families came together, sharing stories and welcoming him as one of their own. It was a day of joy and unity, a testament to the power of trust, perseverance, and love that had grown through trials and challenges. In the weeks that followed, Naomi and James settled into a life that balanced both worlds. They continued to care for the land, teach others, and work alongside the tribe, sharing knowledge and skills learned from their combined experiences. Their partnership became an example for others, showing that respect, understanding, and courage could bridge even the widest divides. Though challenges still arose, the land was wild and danger could appear at any time. Naomi and James faced them together, strengthened by the bond they had formed in the river, the canyon, and the trials that followed. Each day they discovered new ways to support each other, new moments of joy, and a deeper sense of connection. Years later, their story became one told among the tribe and neighboring settlements, a tale of an Apache woman who had chased a cowboy, only to find that through courage, respect, and shared trials, they had built a life together. Their love was celebrated not just for its romance, but for the bravery, wisdom, and mutual understanding that had allowed it to flourish. Naomi and James had started as strangers, cautious and wary, but through danger and perseverance, they had grown into partners in every sense. The land that had once tested them now provided the backdrop for their shared life, a life built on trust, respect, and enduring love. And so, their journey ended not in fear or separation, but in union, acceptance, and hope. A story that would be remembered for generations as an example of what could be achieved when hearts and minds came together, guided by courage and the lessons learned from the wild.